If you have ADHD or if you have a child with ADHD, we need to see those things as superhero abilities. What happens with ADHD over time is if you learn to use it to your advantage, you can do so many amazing things in life.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Therapy Unmasked, a podcast run here at Ability Innovations. Today, I'm joined by Nick.
Hi, everybody.
And we're going to be diving into the topic of ADHD and executive functioning skills that we work on here in the clinic at Ability Innovations. So I think just to start off, Nick, how would you define a child who has ADHD?
I see lots of kids with ADHD and, similar disorders, and they're not all the same. Like I've got some kids that come in and they've got like the hyperactivity part of it to the max. And, we're trying to see if we can get them to like kind of focus on what's in front of them instead of jumping from thing to thing to thing. And then I see other kids that it's more of a filtering problem. So they've got all of this information and all these things coming in. They probably deal with more sensory or information overload than most people. And their ADHD is just a filtering problem. Like they don't really know where to focus their attention. And so they get kind of bombarded. And then there's the other kids that are like more of the inattentive type. And so those kids are like, maybe they're filtering too much, or maybe they're just not capturing everything that they're supposed to. Like their mind just kind of wanders in different spaces like that. And so they're not pulling in the information because maybe their brain doesn't know how to put importance on certain aspects. And so some kids have all three of those, at different times. And so to be able to quantify like what is ADHD with kids, like you're really looking at some of those different areas and trying to figure out which one they are.
I like how you said sensory overload can be related to ADHD. So are you meaning that like there's just so much going on, they're having issues processing all of the sensory input that they're receiving?
Yeah, you think about like what we call a neurotypical brain, or somebody that doesn't have ADHD or similar kinds of things, and we're able to process the input that's coming in a better way. And so I think a lot of times people with ADHD, they may not know how to process that very well. And so they quickly get overwhelmed with everything that's going on. So for instance, even like right now while we're doing this podcast, there's lots of lights that are shining on us. There's background noise from rooms that I can hear back in the clinic. There's a buzz from electronics that's going on. And I'm able to filter all of those things out, and I can switch my attention to those things, but I can also say that's not important information in my brain, and I can turn that off. And people with ADHD may not be able to do that. They may not have that ability. And so all of these things are bombarding them all of the time. And you can imagine how that could get really overwhelming over time.
I feel like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like there was a huge shift over the past, I want to say 10 years in how parents handled ADHD with their children. Because I even remember when I was a kid, if I had a friend or whatever with ADHD, they were on medicine.
And Ritalin right away.
And the medicine was like not so great for them most of the time. They sometimes were hyper-focused on a single thing, and then they'd have a huge crash at the end of the day. And do you feel like the world or like the medical industry as a whole is moving away from like medication and more towards like these play-based sensory input tactics that we do here at the clinic?
In some ways, yes. But I also know that the medication that is used for ADHD is leaps and bounds above what it was back when we were children. Like they maybe had like 2 options, 3 options. Now there's like a whole myriad of options that you can do. And I think doctors are getting really good at helping parents and families dial in to what exactly the kid needs and the just the right dosage. And once you can get to that, it's super effective. It's probably one of the most effective medicines out there.
Interesting.
It really does help. And so I know a lot of families kind of shy away. They don't want their kids on the medicine because of what it looked like back when we were kids. There are lots of people that are on that medicine for their whole life, right? But I think the interesting thing is once you can get a kid on medication and get it just right for them, all of a sudden their skills are just starting to blossom. So what we found is that if you're pairing medication with therapy, all of a sudden they're learning all of the skills and strategies that they need so that they're not medicine dependent anymore. And I think that's one of the pieces that has really grown over the years, is that if we can get kids into therapy, they do so much better, and they're not doing that like medicated and then crash and medicated and then crash. And so it's really helping a lot of kids and a lot of adults that are dealing with ADHD kinds of difficulties, that if they can learn these skills and strategies too, like their medicine can help them do things, but they're not dependent on it.
Yeah. And I think you can take that same philosophy of medication and apply it to other things like children with anxiety, or maybe children with depression, things like that, because there's a way to use medication properly, and then there's a way to use it improperly. So it's just working with the right professionals to make it work.
I think the hardest thing is that people use it as a crutch. Like we think like, if I'm using a crutch, there's something wrong with my leg and I'm going to use this to walk with. And some people just use a crutch the rest of their life, and it doesn't help their leg get better. What helps your leg get better is once it's healed, you have to start walking on it again. You have to learn to walk on it and get those muscles back in order and all of that. If you just use the crutch, it actually debilitates you more. So medication should be like that too, where it should help you get to a certain point, and then you shouldn't be so dependent on it. You should only use it when you need it. Even like you're saying, like with anxiety or depression, those kinds of things, like medication helps a lot. It really does. It can't be used as a crutch. It can't be the only thing that you're doing. We're a whole person, and we can't just mask symptoms.
That's a good way to look at it, for sure. Transitioning back to ADHD, typically what our occupational therapists' strategies they use here when treating ADHD is known as executive functioning, right? Could you maybe give us like a crash course on what executive functioning is for those who don't know?
I mean, I think a lot of parents can go and look on Google and see what it is. There's a lot of different things, like there's a lot of different skill sets that we classify as executive functioning. And, some of them might be social interactions. Some of them might be being able to sequence through and motor plan through different activities, or there's usually about 9 of them. Some websites will show you that there's more and some a little less, but overall, executive functioning basically means that you have this part of your brain that helps you execute things. Executive functioning is like, it's the part of the brain that says, okay, we need to do this, and here's how we're going to do it. And it kind of lays it out in our mind for us. So if you think about like, okay, I've got to clean my room. That might be something that an adult or a child might need to do. And if you are neurotypical, you can say like, okay, I'm going to start over here and I'm going to do this. And then when I'm done with that, I'm going to move to this. That might be the main difficulty for kids with ADHD. One is I don't know where to start and I'm completely overwhelmed with it. And I start doing something and then I'm quickly distracted by, oh, I've got to do this. And before you know it, you haven't done anything and 6 hours have passed by. That's called time blindness. And that's a real thing. And so what we're finding is that ADHD is really an executive functioning disorder. One of the best things that we do in therapy for that is helping them have visual schedules, checklists and different schedules that have different parts to it that are all kind of mapped out for you, so that your brain doesn't have to do that. We just have to go step by step through a process. And if it's visual, if it's something that's on an app where we print it out and we hang it on a wall, and then we just make sure that we're getting all of those check marks done in some way, shape, or form, then we know that we're getting through and we're successful. The children and the people that deal with ADHD, it's not an intelligence problem. Like they're able to understand all of the steps, but their brain can't just process through those steps very well when you make it visual. So a lot of the things that we do in the clinic are about that. And then, stretching out their attention on certain things, or having to do non-preferred tasks and stay with a task for a certain amount of time so that they can get it done. So we try and stretch out those skills, and we try and work really heavy on executive functioning so that those kids can learn those types of skills and the parents can learn those strategies to do at home. And then they're able to be more successful in the important tasks that we do in our lives, what we call occupations.
Great information to have and to know. I wanted to talk about different aspects too of ADHD for parents who maybe don't have a diagnosis for their kids, but are like thinking like, oh, what should I be looking for if my kid maybe needs executive functioning training or things like that. Some common ones I saw, like you mentioned already, were time blindness was one, and then another one was looping, like looping over tasks in your mind. Like you can't let certain things go or move on. Like nothing's ever going to be perfect for you.
If parents are noticing, hey, my kid definitely shows these kinds of things like the looping, or they get stuck, or we use the big word perseverating. They're getting like fixated on something in their daily life, and then everything else melts away and they can't focus on anything else. Or if they have to switch from that, it's this huge battle with lots of behaviors. To some extent, like all kids go through that, but if it's pretty extreme or it's happening so frequently that it's interrupting like their daily tasks and what they need to do, then they probably should get their kid into therapy. And what we do is we try and look at those things and help the kid, depending on their age, help the kid figure out how to lessen that alertness that they're experiencing so that the behaviors are lower and that they're able to process through that. Because once their brain gets triggered into like, oh, I've got to switch from this and I don't want to, and I melt down. Once their brain gets to that point, like you've got to get them all the way calmed back down before they can actually do it again. Behavior is one of the biggest areas where we try and focus on getting calming behaviors and the right kind of sensory input to produce regulation and calming so that they can attend to the tasks that might be non-preferred. If a kid is always getting stuck on a certain task too, then, at therapy, we might be really working on, I know you love this thing. Let's go try this for a few minutes and then this. So we call that first, then. So first we're going to do the thing that you love, and then we're going to switch from it for this amount of time. And we set like a visual timer so that they can see it. They do that for like 5 minutes and then we go back. And if we can stretch out that transition just a little bit, or that time that they're doing the non-preferred task, then we can get them back to what they love. So for instance, I know lots of kids really love Minecraft. And maybe it's just watching the Minecraft movie or it's actually playing the game. But switching from that to have to do chores or even get ready for school or take a bath and get ready for bed, that's a huge and hard and heavy thing sometimes for kids because it's something that they're so absorbed into. So sometimes it's like, okay, we're going to break this up into little parts, or how many more minutes do you want? Sometimes that works with kids. How many more minutes do you want to watch this? And then you've got to get ready for bed. Or let's take a pause. We'll just turn this off for just half a second and we're going to see how fast you can do da-da-da. So we might make it fun and it's just a short pause and we just let them go back and forth to their preferred activity. So there's lots of strategies like that we might use. And the idea is to just kind of stretch out that skill gradually so that they know in real life, like I can't always just do whatever I want to do and stick to the topics and the activities that I just want to do. I have to be able to do all of the other things in life too.
The last part of our discussion today is, does a child need the ADHD diagnosis to come here and work on executive functioning skills?
They don't. A lot of times they need like referrals and pre-referrals is what we call them, like to get into therapy, or, like they'll come here, they'll get an evaluation, and then we check with their doctor that they agree that they have these skills or these deficits that we need to work on. And that's all part of like the insurance world and the medical world. The reality is I think that parents understand their kids a lot more than any medical professional, including us. And so if as a parent, you really feel like, hey, my kid is struggling with this and I want to set them up for success in life, you don't need anybody else to tell you that your kid needs therapy. Maybe you just need some tools at home, or maybe you need a little bit of time of training for your kid and yourself. And you can just decide to do those things, and it's an investment into your kid's future. And so, on the podcast, we've talked a few times about how You don't always need insurance companies to set boundaries for that kind of training. You may not need them to tell you what kind of interventions that your kid needs. You can go out and seek those things out and just get them. Insurance companies in particular, they might restrict you on that. But here at Ability Innovations, we have like a whole program set up so that you can pay and you can get the therapy that you feel like your kid needs, and as much therapy as you feel like your kid needs, or as little therapy. And you can kind of dictate all of that. But if you're just going through insurance, you may not have as much say in that. So it's something to consider.
Okay, so let's kind of dive into the sensory connection to everything when it comes to ADHD and executive functioning skills. We talked about like how sensory overload really affects ADHD in these kids. So you as an occupational therapist, sensory is a big part of your job. So how do you use that to help regulate kids or help treat ADHD?
So that's a big thing for a lot of kids with ADHD, is that emotional regulation is huge. And when we're talking about like behavior, like emotional regulation, and it produces behaviors like the crying and the meltdowns and all of those things, those are what a lot of parents are coming to address. And sensory is like the sibling to behavior. So they're not the same thing, but they can work together. They're siblings. They're closely related. And so one of the things that we look at with sensory is that it's very developmental. The interesting thing about ADHD is a lot of kids that have ADHD socially or even like mentally, they can be behind. They can be delayed in where they're at. And so they may not be able to learn those kinds of social skills or emotional regulation skills that they should have been learning at their age. And so we can come in and kind of help bridge that gap a little bit. And a lot of what we're doing is like for the emotional regulation is calming activities. We want to help kids bring down their alertness level. And we talk about that like, how does your engine run? That's a program. It's called the Alert Program, and it's largely used for schools. I like the idea behind it is that every kid has an engine, and sometimes their engine revs up really high and they're just going full speed. And we need to do things that bring their engine level down so that they're functioning at that just right level, not burning out, and we're seeing all the behaviors. And so sometimes we've even got kids where they crash and their engine is running too low. And we've got to do things that raise their alertness level and bring them back up to that just right challenge, or that just right level. That's what we call it, is the just right challenge. And that's extremely helpful for kids with ADHD, because if you can figure out what kinds of sensory activities will either bring your kid down or bring them up to that just right level, then all of the things that we need to work on are right in that zone. If the kid is feeling happy and calm and peaceful, they're going to engage well with others. They're going to learn all the things that they need to do. They're going to be able to focus better, and they're going to be able to perform all of the things that we need them to do at school or at home, or in front of others that they might need to do. If you're asking them to do something and they're melting down, it's because they're not in that just right zone.
Yeah, you know what's so interesting is we talk about the just right zone. Like I feel like every time we do a podcast, It is just honestly such a big deal about a child's growth and development, is being in that just right area so that they're open to developing and learning and growing as a person.
Yeah, and it's something that maybe we can have another podcast about, but there's this idea called the polyvagal theory. So it's a theory. And they talk about how even as adults, we need to be in that zone where we're happy and calm and peaceful. And most of us don't live in that zone. We spend most of our lives in this like orange zone. And the red zone is like things are melting down, fight or flight. I feel like the world's on fire kind of stuff. And we're not able to sustain that fight or flight response. We're not able to sustain that for very long. It's very taxing on our bodies. So our bodies will just naturally kick us out of that. But if we don't go all the way back to green, where we feel happy and calm, we're staying in orange and yellow, it's really easy to get kicked back into red. And so we have to do the things that help kids and help people get back to green fully and stay there for as long as possible, because that's that optimal zone. That's where all of the great things in life happen. And if we can't get to that very frequently, then our lives are very chaotic.
Right. And even the quality of your life is lower.
Low, yeah. And it produces all kinds of other health problems. So that's kind of our goal, is that we want families in general, but we want kids to be able to know what green feels like and how to get back there.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, I think that's all I have to talk about. Do you have anything else you'd like to?
Yeah, I think we've got a lot of great blogs and things like that you can check out. Some of them are even great about emotional regulation. And yeah, let us know how we can serve you guys best.
Well, thanks for joining us today for this episode of Therapy Unmasked. Therapy Unmasked is brought to you by Ability Innovations and Children in Motion, pediatric therapy clinics located in Davis County, Weber County, and then Children in Motion is up in Murray. And this podcast is completely supported by those clinics and all the amazing things they do each and every day there. I did want to also bring up that we have our summer camp signups going on right now, and the signups for those will end on Memorial Day. So this podcast will come out before that. So just keep in mind that if you want to get your kid into one of our amazing summer camp programs, act on it as soon as possible, because those signups will be closing soon. We have an emotional regulation one and a social skills one that would work really well for kids who have ADHD and things like that. So it would be a great environment for them.
It needs to be said that if you have ADHD or if you have a child with ADHD, we need to see those things as superhero abilities, because what happens with ADHD over time is if you learn to use it to your advantage, you can do so many amazing things in life. A lot of the movers and the shakers in the world have ADHD. A lot of people do. And so if you can turn those abilities that you have that maybe make you neurodiverse, you can use that to really do great things in the world if you learn how to use it as a superpower.
And I feel like that's why we're here, to help kids unlock that superpower, right? That there's nothing wrong with them. They're perfect the way they are, but we can hone those skills.
Enhance it. Yeah, hone those skills. I like it.
Alrighty. Well, thanks for joining us, and we hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next episode of Therapy Unmasked.
Bye.
Bye.